Hello world, welcome back to whatever this is. So I'm outside looking in and it's clear just what's happening with this Charlie Kirk news. I thought I will share my experience and its entanglement with this American man in hopes to validate my opinion that this event will have far-reaching implications that will ripple across the realms of politics, religion, and global culture. It's no secret that America is at its most polarized state right now. Some of the reactions I've seen from this horrendous event have shocked me. And I hope whatever it is that has overcome all the people celebrating this tragedy never touches our African shores. There is a palpable disdain for humanity that you can see in the actions of the people who are celebrating his death, that I doubt even they realize that they are possessed by it. But I don't want to focus on the misled people celebrating the death of a fellow human. I want to focus on the positive effect that a man like Charlie Kirk had on the life of a random Kenyan man oceans away in East Africa. So what right do I have to comment on this distant event? Maybe if I gave you an anecdote of how the journey of my life intercepted with that of a young Charlie Kirk, I might get you to understand why this distant event means as much as it does to me and why I think its implications will be much more far-reaching than anyone can predict at this point. So let's get right into it. I'm 34 now. Charlie died at 31, if I'm not wrong. At one point in my life, I identified as an agnostic atheist, which I can attribute to an insatiable appetite for curiosity at a time when information was scarce. But that didn't happen until my early 20s in university in Malaysia. I went to university as a loose Christian. I literally only identified as a Christian because that's how I was raised. But I didn't know then that you needed your own reasons to justify what you believe in. And I learned that the hard way. It didn't take too long before I realized that the Malays were a lot more convicted in their Muslim faith than any Kenyan I had seen back home, including the pastors. I would get in a taxi and the first thing the driver does is question my faith. Like they knew way more about Muhammad than I knew about Jesus. On top of that, I'm feeling very loosely connected to this faith I call my own, because the truth is, it came on boats with missionaries who later turned into colonizers. So I'm not about to defend that in a foreign land, but I still want to be a good person. So I decide, let me join a church. I bet that will solidify my faith in a way that I can defend it. Because even though I am skeptical of it, I would like to think I'm intellectually honest enough that I can acknowledge and pursue the universal benefits of said faith. But that decision came with a lot more questions for me. I joined this church called Glad Tidings, and the pastor was this Chinese lady. I attended for a couple of weeks until this one time, I'll never forget what happened. She's praying and she starts speaking in a language I've never heard before. So I turned to the lady next to me and I'm like, what language is she speaking? Is that a Malay dialect or something? And the lady says, she's speaking in tongues. Now, my understanding up to that point was that prophets were divinely inspired by God when prophesying to people in distant lands so that they can preach in their language and be understood by those people. I didn't know that meant speaking gibberish. In my mind, I thought all godly things are useful, good, and true. And this was none of that. So that left me with way more questions than I came in with. So I retreated to the internet because this was the first time I had access to that kind of information flow. And also it was the first time I owned a laptop of my own. And with the free internet I could access at school, I got a freedom to explore ideas that I just hadn't experienced up to that point. I decided from that point on that I would be the steward of my own knowledge, that I would read the Bible by myself and do my own research so that I could come to my own conclusions, instead of taking the advice from a pastor who has no idea the context I'm coming from. I got into articles about theology and I dove headfirst in the world of religious internet debates. I watched every religious debate I could find. Atheist versus Muslim, Muslim versus Hindu, Christian versus Buddhist, anything I could get my hands on. And I started noticing something. The atheists, they just kept winning. They were amazing orators. And they made a fool out of every pastor sheikh or guru that they came up against. Now keep in mind, this was the age of the four horsemen: Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, and the late Daniel Dennett, and the famous Christopher Hitchens. All these guys were masters of the English language and philosophic scholars in their own right. They rationalized their arguments so well that if you cared about winning, there was no way you could disagree with them. I bought their books and soaked in their ideas. They had an understanding on modern science that felt like they could scientifically explain anything. And something about that gave me solace in a reality where my faith was literally standing on loose foundation. Before I knew it, I'm a full-blown social justice warrior in online comment sections, defending my LGBTQ relatives without them even asking me to. I see now in retrospect that what I was indeed doing was chasing that debate-winning feeling. But it wasn't too obvious back then because I was standing too close to the elephant. I took this new agnostic atheist identity wholeheartedly, feeling intellectually and morally superior over anyone who would disagree with what felt like universal truths at the time. I would tell all my friends and family that I'm no longer a believer with glee. And I can't lie, I got a kick out of shattering their realities with carefully crafted arguments. If there's one thing I learned from the atheists that I use to this day, it's their mastery of the English language and philosophical principles like epistemology, logic, rationale, heuristics, biases, logical fallacies, and the extent to which they push these principles to their limits, effectively building entire global industries based on these concepts. It's amazing. I later learned that these principles were propagated by elements of a phenomenon that is known as the Faustian spirit, which was fostered in the age of alchemy and is connected to the birth of Hermeticism. But that's a story for another day. This newfound knowledge is precisely why I then changed my course in university from telecommunication engineering to digital media and advertising, because I started seeing how global companies use these concepts and they were exploiting people's lack of knowledge of these concepts for profit. And I wanted in on that revenue stream. So I came back home from university and eventually I got this prestigious position in an international advertising agency, overseeing ridiculous budgets and making the most money I've ever made in my adult life when I get a meaning crisis. I am smack dab in the middle of the most money I've ever made as an adult up to that point, sleeping at 4 a.m. because you can't argue with Coca-Cola when they're paying you 16 million to shoot a 45-second TV commercial. So I find myself in a position where I can't sleep because I have to sell my country carbonated sugar water. Something just wasn't adding up. I couldn't justify trading my time away to literally sell obesity to my people. And that's where Charlie Kirk comes in. Characters like him and Jordan Peterson were preaching about things that I was going through at that moment, despite being oceans away. They talked about finding meaning in intangible things at a time when the mental trappings of the four horsemen trained me to only give credence to the material. On top of this, I became a father, and that's the straw that broke the camel's back. All of a sudden, I'm faced with a living, breathing reason for why I need to take my beliefs seriously, because I have to pass them down. It was their call back to spiritual meaning that aided that transition for me. They made me see the value of the evolutionary legacy of the collective psychological archetypes captured in the scriptures for what they really were. Not just mere stories, but a literal time capsule, recording patterns of behavior over time to inform future generations how to act in a way that is synergistic with everything that is good. That's how I see the Bible now. Yes, this knowledge was brought to us on boats by fallible men. But is it useful? Is it good? Is it true? The answer is a resounding yes. So I credit Charlie Kirk and men like him for how meaningful my life feels right now. Because thanks to the ideas he espoused, I'm experiencing what feels to me like spiritual satisfaction. I feel integrated in my being. Nothing in the New Age, postmodernist, atheist movement gave me anything close to that. So mentally, I have inhabited both the left wing and the right wing state of mind as an African born in Kenya who on the surface has nothing to do with the political or religious climate in America. That's why this story hits home for me. And as if to affirm my transition from the left to the right, people who claim to be progressive and tolerant, they start celebrating upon the news of the passing of this great man. Now, this isn't even about left and right anymore. This is about insanity versus humanity. Disagree with these ideas all you want, but you may want to question your ethics when you find yourself on the side celebrating the death of a man who fought for universal freedoms, fundamental human rights, and natural law. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm purposefully trying to avoid using religious terms when I'm talking about this, so that I can sidestep the emotional dogma that comes with heavy topics such as this. So I'll try to keep the rest of my language as neutral as I can. Now, it's clear that every society that has ever existed agrees subconsciously that there are inherent, objective, and unchangeable principles based on reality, the physical universe, and universal human nature. And they are all derived from the natural order in which we can all observe. Everyone can see this. So let's call it natural law. Instead of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, let's call it natural law. Okay? These are invisible forces that govern our reality. So like gravity is a natural law. You can't argue out its existence. The same way polarity is another invisible natural law. That means up and down, left and right, dark and light, yin and yang. Another invisible natural law is cause and effect. We can all agree that every action has a reaction. It's physics. We can see the manifestations of that law physically, but also as significantly, we can see that there are also mental manifestations of this law. That's why Jesus preached, what one sows, he will reap. That's exactly what Charlie Kirk preached. This is something all religions are trying to either talk about, solve, or articulate. A coherent moral framework beyond subjective or majority-driven rules. This is nothing like the Nazis who decided that they were all a superior race, and because they all decided that, then they felt the right to take out another completely different race. This is nothing like that. This is based on a universal consensus, not just within one race, but within every human. He was an advocate for the kind of meaning and love for all that is good in this life that inspires a civil society which is rooted in reason, freedom, and genuine justice. Now, let me redirect you to the words of King Leopold II as he advises his missionaries on their expedition to Africa. He writes, "They speak and submit to a Mungu, and what else I don't know. They know that to kill, to sleep with someone else's wife, to lie, and to insult is bad. Have courage to admit it. You're not going to teach them what they know already. Your essential role is to facilitate the task of administrators and industrials, which means you will go to interpret the gospel in the way it will be the best to protect your interests in that part of the world." So yes, this knowledge was brought to us on boats by fallible men who used it to exploit. But is it useful? Is it good? Is it true? Absolutely. Charlie Kirk was a passionate Christian. He preached the teachings of Christ. The teachings of Christ clearly tried to articulate these natural laws that affect all of us. They point toward living aligned with reality and fundamental truths that bring about harmony, compassion, justice, and peace. He was promoting a morally aligned life, rooted in universal truths, voluntary action, genuine care, and respect for human dignity and freedom. So as sad as this whole debacle is, I'm glad the whole world gets to see what reacting from a place of care and love for humanity looks like, as opposed to this love for death that we're seeing on the other side. It's clear that silencing someone with violence or bullets only proves the power of their voice and the weakness of your argument. That's a low IQ move. I'm deeply saddened by this death, but it has also lit a fire in me that was sparked by Charlie Kirk. I pray for comfort for his young family that is left behind, but I know without a doubt that the journey he started will be completed by many others, including myself. And so I hope I have proven to you that Charlie's work had positive benefits that rippled all the way to the shores of East Africa and touched this random guy talking to you on YouTube right now, who on the surface has nothing to do with American politics. Yet here I am, touched by the death of this great American pundit. I appreciate anyone who took the time to listen and watch this video. If anything I said in this video gave you some value or some understanding of why this great man meant a great deal to me, I would really appreciate if you left a comment detailing your thoughts, like and subscribe the channel so that we may continue to grow this acquaintance. Until next time, peace.